Hi, Barbie. How are you? Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm doing well.
And by the way, before the show, I did hear the cat. So,
Did you
for everyone
see?
tuning into the show, but Barbie's cat was really eager to join us on the show. And so if you could hear the door back in the background.
It's
that was
relentless. His
Yeah.
little paws underneath the door rattling it because he wants to come in so badly. But if he does, he'll sit right here.
That reminds me of when I lived at home. Well, for years we had loads of cats growing up, and they always did that. It was like kind of gave me a flashback. It's dedicated. Does he or she scratch the door as well? Because that's even more annoying. Because my parents used to get really annoyed with the paint going everywhere.
Yes, sometimes. He hasn't started it on this one though, because it's a slider door.
Oh, okay.
So normally I'll just crack it enough for him to stick his head in and see what's going on. But once he hears your voice and sees movement on the screen, he'll want to come up here and touch the screen and figure it
Really?
out. So, oh yeah, he's super curious. He's a sweet cat, but he's just incredibly curious, and now he's incredibly loud.
That's all right. Before we jump in, tell everyone a bit more about yourself personally, Barbie, and your journey to where we are today.
So, goodness. Well, obviously you can see on my title, it says former Chief HR Officer. So as many millions of people around the globe have been impacted, my role was eliminated a few weeks ago. The company was hit very hard by COVID, and they had to make a difficult decision to kind of restructure the HR function, so my role was impacted. But the good news with that is that I was working on kind of a 3 to 5 year plan to launch my own organization and firm, because the company I worked for was owned by a PE firm. And if you know that PE cycle, they typically buy and sell companies every 3 to 5 years. So I was kind of planning for that moment when they sold the company. So this is just fast forwarding my plans. But prior to this event, I've worked for some of the world's largest brands in HR capacities, from talent acquisition, managing all of the business partner functions, really kind of a utilitarian role, and have pretty deep experience in high volume recruiting and TA, as well as every other aspect of human resources. So it's an exciting time. I'm looking at almost 25 years of experience within this space, and looking forward to taking that and really helping HR leaders, HR practitioners, and bringing forward what I've learned and some of the stories and the experiences to help grow the talent of tomorrow. And so launching my own consulting firm is an exciting time for me, and I'm really looking at it a bit differently than the traditional consulting role, where I'm not interested in going into a company and selling them on consulting services. There's a million people out there doing it, and there's some phenomenal folks in that space. I really have passion for growing talent, the individual contributor who wants to grow their career, who wants to become a leader, who wants to level up and be that director or that VP. I'm building a platform and an ecosystem to where I can work with those individuals who want to grow their career and really get that one-on-one coaching from somebody who's been there and done it and understands what they're going through. I think it's a bit different when you're receiving coaching and advice from somebody who's been in the seat versus somebody who has
Read all the books.
School, right? And read the books. It's a little bit different, right? And so for me, I'm excited to bring that forward to people.
We always talk about a lot of silver linings coming out of the current and this is the one, right? It took a big disruption in my own organization. We got, my last business was bought by a private equity company, and there was huge changes happening internally, and that was a trigger for me to start this company. Yeah. And there's never a good time. Years from now, you'll be talking about how we're talking about how some of the most innovative and successful organizations were born during COVID.
Yeah.
Right? And started during COVID, and you'll be one of them.
I hope so. Well, it's interesting. There's a quote that I believe in, and it's actually going on my website, and it's Albert Einstein. And he says, in the midst of crisis lies great opportunity. And I truly believe that. And if you can see through the noise and kind of diminish the panic and get through all of that when you're in crisis, to look at what can I do about it, and what actions can I take, and how can I move through it. That's your opportunity. And so I'm hoping that, others find that as well.
Yeah. And to be honest, some of the SMEs I'm speaking with on a daily basis could use the advice and experience of someone like yourself now more than ever. There's never really been a better time when they need someone like yourself in their corner as well. So, well, let's jump into the topic of the show. One thing that really stood out from our first conversation was really listening to your experience around knowledge, experience, skills that HR leaders are going to need for the future of work. What does that look like? And you went over 5 sort of the key areas, key tips, tricks, as well. And I'd love to share that with everyone listening on the show right now.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I've been on many CHRO forums, especially as a result of COVID. And as I'm sitting here in these conversations, I take notes. I have a notebook right here, right? I take notes as I'm talking. And I kept finding these themes popping up. And then as I looked back through my experience coaching my own teams, my own direct reports, and growing the talent of my own teams, these themes kept popping up. So I started writing them down. And then all of a sudden, when you do that, right, if you do that enough times, you're like, okay, I get it.
You write the same things down over and over again.
You write it down over and over again, and you're like, okay, there's something to this. So these 5 imperatives are actually turning themselves into a book, Chris. So I'm very excited about that. The first one, if we just go through the list, right? So the first of the 5 imperatives is for every HR person, regardless of what level you are within your organization or your role, or if you're in talent acquisition or a business partner or total rewards, is to understand you must be a business leader first and an HR leader second. And so many folks start down the HR path and they get in what I call the HR bubble, and they forget that they are actually driving a business, and they've got to be an integral part of the business. And there's so many different factors that have to go into that. And so some of the video content you've seen is I'm trying to break down what that means. So be a business leader first and HR leader second. The second imperative is to be agile and adaptive. We've got to step away from being the HR policy police. We have to step away from making everything so incredibly complicated and look at what are we solving for, what is our purpose, and how do we move through our role and the tasks at hand, and respond appropriately. Number 3 is inform and influence. I'm a firm believer that HR folks need to use data, experience, and your gut to inform and influence decisions. Using data alone doesn't always tell the whole story. Using experience alone doesn't always tell the whole story, and your gut alone doesn't tell the whole story, but the combination of those 3 really can inform and influence and paint a picture of what's happening or what you may need to recommend for your business leaders. Number 4 is practical solutions. I used to say this to my teams all the time, kind of joking, but it's true. If you want to take something simple and make it incredibly complicated, give it to an HR person, right? We tend to overcomplicate everything. So it's really looking at what are the problems in front of you? What are the challenges you're facing? And coming up with a practical way to solve that. And embedded in that is simplicity, ease of use, and making sure that you're solving a problem for your business, not solving a problem just because it's the latest HR trend that you might need to think about. Mm-hmm. And all of this, which is number 5, all of this is wrapped in being courageous. It is not easy delivering messages. It is not easy. The work of human resources, the work of people is not easy. It's not black and white. People aren't widgets. They're not a box that you can push down the assembly line. So there are so many different facets, and you have to be able to step forward in courage. It takes resilience and grit There are so many words that we could use in that, but I think courage sums it up. And all of this is underpinned by trust. And trust for your organization, trust for the executive team, trusting yourself, trusting that you're doing the right things for the right reasons. So all of those things kind of come together to me as HR imperatives for HR leaders and the future of work and taking the HR function forward.
Mm-hmm. Love it. Great. And there's so many other questions to go into each of those five areas. But for the last two areas, we were speaking about current events in the news. Without us being sort of too tone deaf, as you put it. But beforehand, could you talk about how they link back to, current events that's happening in the news and the media right now?
Yeah, sadly, in America, we're dealing with some pretty tough issues right now. Well, we've been dealing with it for hundreds of years, but it has reared its ugly head again. And racism exists in this country, and if you're out there denying it, then your head is in the sand. It's happening. People are dying. Black people, brown people, people who don't have English as their first language, people who practice a faith that may not be as widely accepted as Christianity is in this country. And HR leaders and people leaders, executives, CEOs, now is the time. If you haven't already stepped forward with COVID, if you haven't already stepped forward with some of the other situations your company has been dealing with and this country is dealing with, now is the time to do it. And I have to say, I'm really impressed by those organizations who have already stepped forward and made very strong statements about who they are as a company and that they will not tolerate this discrimination, and they will use whatever means they have to support their employees who are people of color, and our society as a whole. Nike is a company that comes to mind. They put out a commercial, and this time they actually went against their own tagline, right?
For once, just don't do it. Was that right? Don't do it rather than just do it. So for once, just don't do it.
Yeah. And when you do something like that, the world responds. I believe it's either Adidas or Reebok. I think maybe it's Adidas. Adidas actually is supporting Nike's post.
Right?
I
saw it.
It's the right thing to do. Delta, Ed Bastain from Delta made a very bold statement because they have a hub in Minneapolis. And he's like, we will use whatever means we can to improve and to change what's happening in this city, because Delta is a big part of the economy in Minneapolis. So there are those organizations out there who are stepping forward. The CEOs are stepping forward. Their leaders are, but far too many are still quiet. And
why do you think that is, Barbie?
I think for so long, especially in the HR space, but for so long, we have compartmentalized our relationship with employees. We have seen them as one-dimensional people. They come in, they do a job, they leave. And it's not one of my 5 imperatives, but it's certainly woven through here, is people, we're whole people. We bring our whole selves to work. We don't hang our humanity at the door when we clock in. And employers and HR leaders need to start seeing people in multi-dimensions. And we are sophisticated consumers. We are parts of a family. We are diverse. We have backgrounds you may not know anything about. We have relatives, spouses. You don't know if you don't start asking the questions. And now is the time to step forward and be very intentional with the questions you're asking, and then stop talking. Listen. Hear what they have to say. Start the dialogue, because if you don't think people within your organization are already talking about what's going on in the world, again, your head is in the sand. You're fooling yourself. They are talking about it. And a few weeks ago, I posted on LinkedIn a video where I referenced the 2019 Edelman Global Trust Barometer. I don't know if you saw that, Chris, or not, but
I actually interviewed CHRO recently.
Did you? Okay.
On that, yeah.
I was really surprised. I didn't expect to see some of the data that was in there, but employees stated within there very clearly that they trust their employer more than any other source of information over media, the news, everything, right? So if we have to take that seriously, we have to honor that trust that they're putting in us and help make sense of some of this for them and help take some of the noise out of the air within the workplace and calm it down by letting them know where you stand and that you're there to support them and you're there to have their back and to say, no, we won't tolerate this. We won't allow this to happen within our workspace, but we're going to take it a step further and be a stronger partner within our communities, because every one of us is part of a community outside of just the business. And these organizations have got to start stepping forward with the courage it takes to make those bold statements.
Mm-hmm. And also at the same time, though, to understand and to communicate that they don't have all the answers.
Yeah, exactly.
So okay. So rather than not communicating because you don't have the answer, communicate that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
Otherwise, you cause more uncertainty and more anxiety for people. They'd rather know where they stand, like you just said, than actually to be at home wondering what the future looks like. And then you don't know, and that's okay.
Asking, what can we do? What can I do to help you feel more secure, to help you feel as though you're seen and heard, and that you have the same equality and equity as the rest of the employees within this company or within this community? Asking those questions are where we need to be right now. Because to your point, we don't have the answers. We don't know what that individual might need, and it's not going to be the same for everyone. And I think that's the other side of the coin, is that employers, HR folks, we want to paint everything with the same brush. We want to roll out a program that solves the problem. And this problem is not going to be solved by a program. And it's one of the things I struggle with the D&I world right now. And I actually posted something about this over the weekend. There are so many, diversity initiatives and organizations out there who will come in and solve your D&I issues so that you can check the box and say, yes, we did this, we rolled out this program, we did this, blah, blah, blah. But it's not working. So what are we missing in these initiatives? And I think some of them are great, and I do believe that there's merit to many of the programs, but I believe there's some missing pieces as well, and we've got to figure out how to close that gap. And it's a conversation I'm starting with some folks to say, what are we missing? What is it that we're not doing within our organizations to help you feel like you are seen, to help you feel as though you have the same, platform as everyone else? So it's a dialogue that we've got to start.
Mm-hmm. Ashish made a good comment on LinkedIn. He said, title of the show, love it, future of work. Chris, we're already here. I completely agree. By the way, COVID has fast-tracked us 5-10 years, sort of leapfrogged us.
Yes.
We're seeing that already. I spoke to a CHRO only a few days ago that said, Chris, we had a 3-year plan to transition to working from home, and we did it within 1 week. I was like, that 3-year plan you had to move those 20,000 employees remote, you did it in 1 week. What a surprise.
But isn't that amazing, right? When you think about that, you take that example and you go back to these imperatives and you say, practical solutions, agility and adaptability. When we were forced to do something, look at what we did. Yeah. But if we have our option, we want to sit around and talk about it for years, literally. Right? But when you have to do it, you make it work. And that's something else that's another thing I've noticed. As I mentioned, I've been on a lot of these CHRO forum calls and talking about COVID and employee well-being. And that's the new buzzword, right? Employee well-being is going to be a phrase that's going to be beaten into our heads over the next probably 5 years or so. And some of the CHROs and leaders of some of the world's largest organizations, they work at a different level, right? They're very strategic and they're kind of up here 30,000 feet. And they're talking about, yes, I've been in 4 or 5 meetings over the past 3 weeks talking about employee well-being and some of the things that may need to happen going forward. And I shake my head and I'm like, guys, we cannot sit and talk about it and pontificate about what employee well-being means. We need to be out there asking our employees, what does it mean for you to feel cared for by me? I'm your employer, I'm your HR leader, I'm your CEO, I'm your CFO, I'm your whatever. What does employee well-being mean to you? Let's start there. Let's put some practical solutions in place. Employee well-being for some people might mean that I have flexibility to start my workday a little bit later, 3 days a week, because I have to take my kids to daycare or whatever, right? Employee well-being for this other person might mean that they get to work from home on Wednesdays because they have an issue in their, whatever it is. So it's not a one size fits all. Again, it goes back to the same thing. We cannot just institutionalize employee well-being, because then it won't work. It has to evolve with people and with the way the world changes. And I find sometimes I get very frustrated. I move very quickly. And as you mentioned earlier, right, we had a talk about me launching a business. Yep. Here we go. You know, I can move faster than some people are comfortable with, but I feel as though if we don't, our employees and our people are the ones who are suffering. We can't just continue to sit around and talk about the things we need to do, because then we're 5 years behind where we need to be. And our business leaders get frustrated, right? Operations folks, they live and breathe minute by minute, right? They're looking at their productivity numbers minute by minute, and they're adjusting what they need to adjust to make sure that they can produce what they need to produce within that timeline. Well, we need to be looking at our business minute by minute as well as HR teams. And if we're not adapting to the changes in the environment and in our cultures, then we're letting people down. We're letting our businesses down. So we've got to stop thinking about what if and look at what is, and then move it forward. Strategic conversations are absolutely necessary, and I'm not saying to move away from being a strategic business leader, but we have to look at those conversations and then distill it down into actionable items that are practical for our businesses. And that's where I feel like a lot of HR people get lost. They get lost from this strategic ideation to actual execution. If you think about it, how many times have you been to an HR conference? Chris, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You know, there's these big conferences, right? I went to one in Chicago, 40,000 people, and you get really excited about these. You see the speakers on stage, and you
write down all your notes. You can write down all your notes. You get super.
I take all my notes, and I'm like, this is amazing, and you get pumped up, and you're so excited, and you get back to your office, and you're like, now what the hell am I supposed to do?
The notepad goes back in the drawer.
Exactly.
The daily work happens again, and then you're back in the cycle.
Exactly. Because it's so theoretical. It's so far out there that they don't know.
Even when it's not, though, because like we have, for example, moving to remote, we already had the technology, the capability, everything was in place. It was just the mental block of everyone's, the fear of failure. That's what it was. It's the fear of failure. What if it doesn't work? Well, this time around, there's no choice.
Right.
It was always I keep using my wife's, they're going to hate me by this. My wife's organization, they had thousands and thousands of employees that go to work and open up a laptop every day. There's no need for them to be there. They don't even interact with their manager throughout the day, most days. There is no need for that person to travel 1 hour to work and from every day to open a computer, to sit there and type in information and then leave.
Right.
There's no need for that. But apparently, for the last 7 years she's worked there, it was a priority. You have to be in the office. We cannot do this remotely. And again, within 1 week, the entire business is working remotely.
Right. It's a fear of failure, but it's also a lack of trust.
Yes, that too. More so, actually, I think.
Leaders, you've got to lead with trust. And I'm a firm believer that, we lead people and we manage a process, we manage a project, but we lead people. And if you're not leading with trust, then work from home seems very scary to you. And we have too many managers out there and not enough leaders. And these managers are managing to activity versus outcomes. And if you're going to be a people leader, you need to look at managing to outcomes, managing to results, not to activity. It doesn't matter to me what activity necessarily they're doing if they're delivering the results the organization needs. And I've spoken to many CEOs about this. And time after time, what I'm hearing is because that particular CEO can't work from home. And they don't like it. It doesn't work for them. Maybe they can't focus, or it's just a generational thing. So for them, they can't conceptualize that someone could actually work from home and be productive and be committed and deliver
Without
results.
someone over their shoulder looking at them.
Right. And so because it's a block in their minds, therefore no one else can do it. And again, it goes right back to that's the definition of privilege, right? We've got to start making these connections throughout all of these themes to say, people, stop. And just because you don't get it and you don't understand it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means you need to open up your mind a little bit.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my co-founder Shane a few days ago, because obviously we're not working from our office, and we're a small team. And I was like, why do we have an office? And we had that conversation because our lease is nearly ended on which is a good timing for us. And we was saying, why did we, start a business where everything we do, whether it's our, events, physical events around the world, or our virtual workshops and summits, why do we actually have an office? And the only answer we can come up with is that that's what we know. Like that, no, we came from working in an office. That's what you do. That's how things work. So it's like we're just preconditioned that when you start a company, obviously you need an office, right? So we didn't even consider the remote work angle of it. And for the first year and a half, it was just me and Shane in an office. We could have been literally sitting in my living room.
Right.
There's no difference, and it was such a huge overhead for us.
Yeah.
To have that. And I'm like, we're working pretty good right now as a team remotely, Shane. And but long story short, we actually have kept the office because I need it for the podcast studio, and I'm going to be bringing a lot of guests in face to face once this is all over. Hopefully, we're going to have CHROs traveling in to join us in the office as well. It'll be safe, I promise. Yes. As well. But yeah, it's a lot of times we're kind of just doing it because that's the way it's always been done. And people just don't feel comfortable, and we can't punish the many for the few people that may take advantage. Right.
And then you manage their performance, right? That's the thing, is that for those people who can't seem to figure it out, well, then maybe it's not the right role for them. Okay. But don't.
And that's okay too.
That's okay. It's all right. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah. What are you hearing from your peers? I'm sure you've been speaking to other CHROs right now. Obviously, one of the most difficult times ever to be a CHRO leading during these times. How are they getting on personally?
They're exhausted. They're exhausted, right? Folks who are leading HR teams and leading their organizations through COVID, and now in America through the situations we're dealing with now with race, they're tired. But I think many of them are also in some ways energized by the conversations that are happening, because many of us have been trying for years, right? Get these things in front of our people and to help our other executives see the necessity to have these conversations and why it's important for us to support our people in different ways. And one of the things I did while I was at BitGraphic is we started celebrating holidays that were important to our people. So every year I would send out a questionnaire to folks and say, tell me what you celebrate as an individual, as your family, what holidays are important to you, and what like monthly celebrations, so like Black History Month or Pride, what have you. And we started sharing these out with the entire company. We would do some research and gather some information about like the origin of the holiday, where it's celebrated, why it came to fruition, and we would share that out with the company, and we got such great feedback. We've gone too far. The pendulum goes from one extreme to the other, and we need to find that space in the middle where we are acknowledging everyone. You know, we've gone so far to the one side where it's a vanilla box, because we're so afraid to step on toes and say something that somebody's going to be offended by, that now we don't celebrate anything, right? We don't talk about anything because that's the only safe way to do it. And I challenge that it's not. Why not celebrate everything? Why not educate people on, you know, what does Ramadan mean, or what does the National Holocaust Remembrance Day? Why do people acknowledge that? And they're not necessarily celebrating that, but they're acknowledging that in remembrance of those who were lost. And why? Why does Pride exist, right? It's June 1st. Why is Pride in June? Does anybody know the answer to that, right? So tell people why those things exist and educate them. I'm a firm believer, the more knowledge and education our people have, the less afraid they are to have these conversations. So, you know, it's our responsibility to get the information to them.
Yeah. And these aren't like huge, costly activities.
It costs nothing.
Well, exactly. Time. It costs you time.
Yep.
To do, because many organizations, we haven't got the budget to do this, so we haven't. No, there's plenty of things you can do.
That goes to number 4, practical solutions, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Easy to do.
Yeah. And an overarching theme of kind of everything you were talking about as well is like there's so much focus on learning and not enough on the development piece.
Yes.
Right. So this and we need to focus more on development and the execution, and that's something that we've, you know, as a small business, obviously we were hugely impacted by this as an events company, but it was our ability to just execute immediately and innovate and be and which is what has allowed us to, you know, be even in a better position right now during all this. And there are other companies out there now that are also seeing benefits from this as well. There's so much opportunity to be able to do that. But you know, if you're an organization where you're moving, there's no longer an option to move slowly. It is the whole, you know, innovate or die. It's pretty extreme, but it's the truth of the matter right now. And then look, and to be fair to CHROs, every CHRO that I speak to has been pushing for a lot of these initiatives over the years that I speak to them, and they're always telling me, Chris, just how frustrated they are, how slow the business is moving, and they're struggling to get to influence decisions. And these are some of the most successful CHROs I've ever spoken to, by the way, as well. But some of these issues, it takes a global pandemic.
Yes.
To make it happen. That you know, it's taken a global pandemic for some of these things to be realized and actually actioned, which is pretty sad, but also great in the same way, because there's also a lot of opportunity to come out of it as well. So yeah. Well, look, before we wrap up, I want to sort of jump into a quick fire round, which I do with each guest, where I'm going to ask you 5 questions, and you have no longer than 30 seconds to give us some amazing answers. Are you ready?
I'm not good with that. Okay.
What was the number one thing that was holding you back from becoming a chief HR officer?
Being concerned that I wasn't good enough. I am pretty outspoken, and I had the perception that CHROs were so reserved and they had all the answers. And I recognize that that's not the case now, but that was very intimidating to me for a long time, that I thought I couldn't use my voice the way I naturally use my voice if I was in that seat, that I would have to be very reserved. And I've learned that that's not necessarily true.
That that's your biggest strength.
Yes.
I think personally, from knowing you over the last few weeks, that's a huge strength that you have, is to be outspoken, to challenge the status quo is probably one of the most critical things you need. What's the best piece of business advice you've ever received?
Well, I actually posted about this. I think for leaders of any level, to learn how to respond but not react. Very, very different. Respond but don't react. Pause, think through it, and then respond. What's
one book, or to give you more than one book, you'd recommend to our audience, and why?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm a huge Brené Brown fan. So Brené, if you ever hear this, thank you for everything you're doing for our world. So Dare to Lead, The Gifts of Imperfection, anything that she's ever written, I think is so incredibly important, especially where we are today in the world.
Exactly.
I couldn't say more about that. I also love Extreme Ownership, which is a very different book than Brené's, but it is so incredibly important. I think HR folks need to read that book because far too often the folks within the HR space waiting to be told what to do and failing to take ownership of delivering a solution and answering the call. They wait to be told, and Extreme Ownership talks about standard work and really driving solutions to fruition. So I love that book. Radical Candor by Kim Scott. Love that book. So yeah, I could go on and on. There's a lot.
That's another. They're all great books, by the way, as well. So I'll link them in the description for everyone as well. And then the question 4: could you share some internet resources that you use personally as a CHRO to stay up to date with current events and continue your own learning?
I was a member of I4CP. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but it's a great network and a great resource. They do a ton of research and they have just amazing information to share. So I enjoy that network quite a bit. And then I leverage my peer group. I ask questions of people I know, and I use LinkedIn a lot. Ask questions out there. You have access to millions of people on this platform who are engaging because they care. So using that platform to ask questions and see what comes back, I have found very successful as well.
It's so underrated, right? Because people always ask me, Chris, how do you get all of these guests on the show? I'm like, I ask them.
Yeah, ask the question. Ask the question.
They're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I send them a message and be like, hi, Barbie. Listen, I sent you a message, right, on LinkedIn. Yeah. How are you? Love to connect. And that's it. And people are there's a fear of don't be afraid if no one replies back. Like, the way I look at it is, there's more, if there's what happens if I don't reach out,
right?
Rather than the opposite of what happens if they don't reply. There's thousands of HR leaders, who you are, that I've messaged and you haven't come back to me. I'll get you one day. But, that's how I built this entire show and this business is, we bond over a common passion for people. And there's very few HR leaders that I reach out to who, all of them are so happy, like yourself, to come on and give back and share their advice. And because you've been there, you've done it too. You understand how challenging it is. So very underrated piece of advice. Please reach out to your peers.
Yes.
As well. It doesn't take a lot of time to do so. And then last question, what's one thing that you're most excited about the future?
I'm excited about the dialogue that is emerging in the world right now, that we are tackling some really tough conversations. And I'm excited that I do see people coming together to say we've had enough of this divisive community. We cannot continue. We have to come together because we are all people, right? Our blood is the same color. I don't care what color your skin is. It doesn't matter. Celebrate who you are and stop being so afraid of who everyone else is. So I'm excited by these conversations. I'm excited about my business and where I think it's going to go. I've got books in the works. I've got the website launching, the YouTube channel, the podcast, like there's all of these things.
Very busy.
Yes, I'm very busy, but some really cool things coming up. The people I'm meeting, right? You and so many other amazing people who have just shown up in my life in the past few weeks is amazing to me. I truly believe the universe delivers, and it really, really does. So I'm just very excited about the future of what's unfolding.
Super exciting. Well, in the future, what is going to be the website? Because I'll link it in the description for when it is live.
It is my name. Right now, it is my name. So it's just barbiewinterbottom.com. I've gone back and forth on this for a while of what do I call it. I do have a business LLC called People Squad that I'm launching, but my brand is my name right now. Yeah. So I feel like I need to stick with that until I am able to grow to a point where I could potentially transition to the business name.
It should always be your own brand name. It should always be about you and your brand name. Yes, you'll have a business name and a holding company, but
Right.
and also, what did I say to you the first time we spoke? You got
Yes, it is. It is. And my only challenge is my name is so long, right? I love my name.
Oh yeah.
It's just very long, so a lot of
people remember it. It's an unforgettable name. Even today, Shane was like, "Who you got on the show today, Chris?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm speaking to Barbie," and he was like, "Oh, Barbie Winterbottom." So he immediately he's never even spoke to you before,
right.
but he remembers your name. So definitely, you know, your personal brand is so powerful, and focus on it. It's the same reason for everyone listening. You know, my personal brand on LinkedIn has 37,000 or something along those lines followers, whereas our business only has 3,000 or 4,000, because people follow people.
Right.
You know, because people. I had that for some of our sponsors recently. They're like, "Why is it so low on your page?" I was like, "Because people don't want to follow HR leaders the name. They want to follow the people behind the brand, which is me and my team." They're like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "Yeah." There's a reason why people want to understand. You know, they want to have that conversation, not with a marketing someone in the background in the marketing department posted online. So it's important, super important. We've kind of just gone through it really, but if there's any last pieces of advice, what would that be to everyone, and then we'll wrap up from there.
My piece of advice is use your voice. Don't be afraid. Step forward. It takes courage to do it, but now is the time we need your courage. And whatever the scenario is, whatever the situation is, step forward and use your voice. And if you're not acknowledged or heard, then it might be time to look at where you are, right? And find the culture, find the organization that does honor who you are and what you stand for, and then you'll know you're in the right place. But silencing your voice because it's too uncomfortable is no longer okay. So that would be my
amazing
advice.
Well, thank you so much, Barbie. It's super exciting. Thanks for coming on the show first and foremost, and I'm super excited for you and your future and whatnot. And so for everyone on LinkedIn, if you're just tuning in now, make sure you go and follow Barbie over on LinkedIn. She's posting almost daily now.
I'm trying. Yes. Thank you.
As well. And I wish you all the best until we next speak. All right.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate you having me on. Bye-bye.
Bye.